Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome to part 2 of my Deep Techno for Ableton template explanation. Basically, this template I've been creating during my live session on my Audioreakt YouTube channel. It's every 2 Sunday I create a track from scratch. You can come around, ask questions about music production and everything. And so last week we talked about more the sound design, the composition of each track, and today we're gonna focus more on the arrangement, automation, variation, mixing and mastering. So let's have a listen to the track. The main idea of the track was to have something deep, hypnotic, a bit almost ambient. So the main idea was to have something pretty linear, like to don't have like a chorus, verse, something like that. More like having an intro a little bit long, where you will have a bit of the main lead or the main hook into the intro, and then something pretty all the time having the lead playing, not really having a break from the lead. So the main lead was this melody that you could hear. So you can hear we have our intro here, and the lead is coming here from that part here, and then you kind of have the chorus already because it's playing. I call it chorus, but you have to understand that it's just to make you understand different part. And then we have a break, and then it's still playing the same melody, and then we add more ride. So in terms of element, it's gonna be always the same playing the all way around. It's just gonna change in terms of variation, modulation. You have some elements, some SFX which are playing here and there, which gonna add variation. We're gonna play as well with the drum as well a lot to add variation. The lead as well, this main lead as well, got some modulation to put it a bit more in the front and in backward. So that's always gonna help break the monotony. But yeah, the idea is a pretty linear arrangement. That was the main global idea. With the intro, the chorus, we have a small break, and then we have the drop, which is pretty similar to what we had before but without the drum. The difference is as well in the first part, the main lead was kind of muffled, so you could hear it but not really hear it properly, rather than in the second part here you can hear it more. And then we bring back the drums, we play with the rides, we have other element, second kind of lead element with this bleeping sound here, which is playing now together with the main lead, which was not in the first part here. So you still kind of have a structure like an intro, part A, part B, and then part A plus B, and then outro. So that's give you an idea of the global arrangement. Now we're gonna go over each part section to understand a bit more. So first we have the intro, we just have the kick. You have this nice percussion playing, kick bass, and obviously all of this ambience. So all of that is playing for a good 30 seconds. You already have some of the SFX, and then we will get the close hi-hat, and you have this rhythmical synth, which is played together with the bass, had a nice groove. So the first 30 seconds is really like the intro for the DJ, and then it's more like the track is starting now. It's more drums, this high bass sound, and you get more SFX as well playing here and there. So you really start to enter in the track. You will have more element popping here and there. What I mean by that is all of these SFX there, you're gonna hear them playing a lot now. So all these weird things. If you've watch last week's video, I talk about it. So it's a lot of different little sounds that play here and there, sometimes on the left, sometimes on the right. They move around your head, they always change. They have some LFO and variation as well to make them always different. So we goes into there, we have our main lead. We're gonna start to hear our second main lead but with no modulation. So you can hear all the elements popping here and there. Okay, so as this is a deep track, things are going pretty slow. You don't have like variation every 8 bar like in other techno genre. Then we go into small break. So few things happen here. You can see here this scent, we can hear it more, this bleepy scent. We already start to hear it a bit more, and then we introduce our main lead, which sound like this. Our main melody slowly. We have this weird ambient sound as well, which is coming. Then we have the ride. The filter of our main melody is coming up. This is going up. So that's why I call it kind of chorus, because even though we haven't got the first break and it's like it could be still like a bit of the intro, kind of a pre-chorus type of sound, because it's kind of still the intro, but you already have a lot of elements which make it already very driving, very, very energetic, and it's not like the intro, it's already like part of the track itself. We're gonna add even more ride now with the open hat. So the ride and open hats add extra energy. One thing you can see how I use here on the mix down, basically all my tracks are going to the mix down, and then on the mix down I have a low cut, so it's kind of a classic DJ low cut. Pretty effective to introduce new elements. And so here what's happening is with my main lead. So here I talk about the filter, but it's actually the FM amount, which is gonna add more and more harmonic. And so it's going up, and then it's going a bit up more, and then we're gonna get to the break where it's gonna really get up, up, up. Now we're gonna enter on the break. So for the break, I do this often now. I could get rid of the kick straight away, but it sounds kind of weird. So what I will do is I will usually first use the low cut. So I first have the low cut. And then after I get rid of the kick, I still kept the bass here, and the same goes with the ride. You see, and the hats, first I get rid of the ride, and then I get rid of the hats, but I don't get rid of everything together because otherwise it sounds just weird. So here is our break one. So here what we're gonna do, we're gonna get rid of this bleepy sound. And we're gonna crank up a little bit more the FM on this one, so we hear more harmonics, which make our break then like this. Pretty short break here. The idea of the break is not to have something where you're gonna build tension, especially like for a long time. It's not very long break. Like I said, it's a pretty straightforward track, which is pretty much continuous. Like you don't really have break, it's always going on. You have some low cut here and there, but pretty much straightforward track. I don't want like pause like inside the track to have the breakdown, to build tension, release. I didn't really wanted that. I wanted something more like something always going on. And here I get rid of the hats. This way now we can go into the drop, like chorus 2 kind of, where basically I will have my main lead still playing. Here great things to do, it's like to crank up the filter or hear the FM to a very high frequency during the break, and then when you drop the sound you kind of bring down the filter. It creates this great contrast and it works well. You get rid of all of the drum, and yeah, that just works perfectly. So I let a little bit down the main lead, then I bring up harmonics, and then we introduce straight away the drums. So here about the drums, this is something I like to do, how the way I introduce my drums. So you will usually have your closed hat, your open hats, your ride, sometimes crash. I like to always introduce them in a different way. So for example, what I mean by that is like, for example, here I first introduce the closed hi-hat, then I introduce the ride, and then I introduce the open hat and the ride together. Then I get rid of everything, and then instead of introducing again just the closed hi-hat, and then after introducing the ride, and then after the open hats and the ride, I introduce them in the different combinations. So So here is open hats and close the hat playing together. Then after it's gonna be just right one, and then after right two. But yeah, it's just a little something I like to do. And then the track is still going. I modulate the main lead, going up, down, pretty linear, so no that much variation in terms of new element or so, just a lot of modulation. You can see that after I'm gonna bring back this bleepy, glicky, crackling lead. Then after I introduce the ride, the first one. And then the second ride. So you can see it's pretty long time between something new happen, usually at least 16 bar, because like this you really let the time to the track and to yourself to get into the track and get into this hypnotic vibe, because if you have always changement all the time, you don't really have this effect, because it's always something changing. This is something really like work well, especially on the dance floor when you are dancing, you know, you take the time to appreciate the element, the track, rather than having something with break every half 30 seconds. And yeah, that's how our part goes. And then after we're gonna go into the break and outro. So here our final break, again same technique than before. I used a low cut. I didn't get rid of the kick this time, but I did use a low cut. Get rid of the ride just on the same time than the break, and then after still leave this second lead here, but then after I remove it when it drops. And then it's the outro where we're gonna start to get rid of the element one after the other. Usually you bring down the filter on element to make them muffled and to kind of eliminate them, get rid of. Here the same, I use the FM, I reduce the FM, so it's something pretty muffled. I think there is an EQ8 as well here, which is gonna muffle the sound. And slowly I get rid of the element, you see. Here there is no really tips like how you can get rid of. You have to try and see what you can get rid of. It always have to don't sound weird, you know, because if you remove something and it sounds weird, you have to find a way to get rid of it. Maybe use a low pass filter, maybe remove it at a different time, maybe earlier, maybe later. This is just like experiment what works the best. There is no rule as well. Maybe if you want to keep the whole track very heavy until the end, you can do that. Usually it's not recommended because for the DJ it's easier obviously to kind of have this variation, but yeah. So that was it for the arrangement. Pretty simple, straightforward. Now, in order to don't get too bored, you have to play a lot with automation and variation. So you can do different type of things. For example, here on the right, something pretty common, I use the LFO on the pitch. So basically, my right is gonna get this pitch rising up and going down. And I've done the same with the right too. So one part of the track is staying steady, and then it's gonna go up. And then it go down. And these are kind of little details, but which add a lot. So in terms of modulation, you can see like this lead bleepy sound, it's quite a lot. Here basically what I'm doing, I'm using the resonance of the filter, which kind of make the filter self-resonant, which kind of create this weird bleepy sound. And obviously it's never the same. This usually I play the whole track and I modulate live according to what I like. So this is always changing, it's never really the same. One thing which is important as well that I've done on almost all of the track to add variation is you will see this auto pan with a slow rate. Basically what it's gonna do is gonna make you sound go to the left and right slowly. With the LFO it's gonna go in round like this. So this is a great way to add variation. I'm not gonna go over each track, but you can find one on pretty much each track. Now obviously we have our main lead where you have some variation. So here what I've done, because I've used a sine wave, which is kind of a pretty basic sound, using a low pass filter doesn't really make any sense because it's a sine wave, so it's kind of just the fundamental. But I use the FM to add this extra harmonics. So instead of having a rich signal that I will filter, I do the opposite. I have a single frequency which doesn't have that much harmonics, which doesn't have that much high, and I use FM to create this harmonics. So to kind of open the filter, and then I reduce the FM to kind of remove these frequencies, so to kind of close the filter. So it's kind of different way of synthesis and different process. So and yeah, that's what I will modulate the whole track, kind of creating this filter effect modulation. So here again, it's quite of modulation. What I usually do, I will just play the track. I will have anyway my pattern, and I will record live, playing the whole track, record live the modulation. So it depends the feelings, it depends on what all other elements, how they play as well. For example, with this lead 2 as well, you will see it really depends. This you have to experiment live to see what it does, but yeah, that's one of the things I've modulate a lot. And again, I have a low pass filter, but this is more like to introduce the sound. You see, like to slightly introduce the sound, or to kind of get rid of the sound, like I was saying. But then again, here I have a autopan. So here the speed is a bit faster, and there is a bit less harmony than usual. It's just to have the sound going around your head, but very close to the center still. So another great way to add movement and variation is to use phaser or flanger with a slow rate. It's gonna kind of shift the phase or create this kind of pitched a little bit effect, flangery effect. So I've used that a lot in the ambience. And another way that I've done to add variation, obviously, it was like to use a lot of element popping up here and there. I've just already talked about it last week about each individual, but here again, I use autopan kind of randomly to try to make them pop on the left, and then on the right, and then more in the middle, and then on the far right, and then on the far left. Kind of always have a different position, and all of this modulation and all of this variation will make your track way much more interesting. All right, now let's talk quickly about mixing. If you're familiar with my video, you know what I'm gonna say. For me, mixing, it's 88%, about 90% even about how you select your sound, which sound you select to put together. What I mean by that is, for example, the drums. You have to make sure that the drum sounds well even before mixing, because if they doesn't sound well together before mixing, they're not gonna sound well with mixing. As well, how you select your sound, for example, the synth sound, either it's preset or sample. Make sure that they first go well together, they don't overlap each other too much. For example, if you just choose synths which are always playing in the same frequency range, can be a problem. You can obviously use two synths which are in the same frequency range. It can work. Sometimes you're gonna pan them differently, sometimes if you EQ filter them, but it's rather better to try to avoid. And yeah, once you've done that, second thing which is very important, where unfortunately I cannot really give you like advice or tips because it's something you gain with experience, is making sure you get the right level. So I usually like to set my kick at -6, so this is leaving headroom for the rest, and then having the right volume. And very important, usually I will always start, so you start with just the kick, and then I will add the bass, making sure I set the right volume, and then I think I will set my ambience. So this is always something you're gonna go back and forward, because obviously like the ambience now, you will tend to make them a bit less louder at the beginning, but later on when you're gonna start to add elements in the track, you're not gonna hear them enough. So they are good like this. And then I will add my drums one by one. And I will do like this, add one by one and set the volume at the right position. Obviously, you can always go back and change, but that's how I do. And usually once you've done that, you should be pretty much done. There is few things you can do to help. If you feel your mix is not good, for example, kick and bass, you can always see the sidechain. You can try to EQ, but you can see, for example, here I didn't have an EQ. Just make sure your bass is in mono under 130 Hz. And I usually just sidechain. Here the EQ for the kick was just like for sound design purpose. Or you can try to add a bit of transient or reverb to make it sound the kick a bit less dry. And then, yeah, there is things you need to be careful. Sometimes what you will not realize, even me, when I'm producing is like I put too much reverb or the delays are too long. So this is something like you have to be careful. But when you mix, you always have to consider that you want to improve your mix, but you don't want to ruin your sound design. So always keep that in mind. Don't modify too much, because sometimes what can happen is like then your sound doesn't sound the same, doesn't give the same vibes. So yeah, always be careful. I said that last week. I use drum bass a lot. I've made a video about it. I'll put it in the description if you want to know how I like to use it. Basically, I like to use it at the end of the chain to kind of use the compressor to kind of glue everything. I will use drive and crunch to add some extra harmonics. I will damp a little bit because this extra harmonics gonna bring some unpleasant high frequency that you can damp a little bit. And I will use transient to kind of reduce a little bit the tail of the reverb. So for example, you got something from this, very noisy, a bit more in the back. So something a bit more sharp in the front. Now this, I don't do this all the time, for example. Now don't do this all the time. I've done this for the close hat because that's what I wanted. I wanted something in the front, a bit more sharp. But for example, the open hat, it's quite, you see, noisy with a long tail reverb. So you might think, oh, I'm gonna use a drum bass to reduce that. But here I haven't done, because if you do that, you kind of lose this feeling. So it's really case by case. Other than that, I don't do that much processing, to be honest. You can see it's not like there is surgical EQ and compressor on each track. There is absolutely none. The only compressor is some sidechain compression. But you see, you don't have EQ. Even you can see the drum bass I don't use like all the time. But just reverb, yeah, like I said, you have to be careful with the dry rate and the decay time. Sometimes we don't realize, but we put too much. Maybe EQing the reverb sometimes can be great. That's some solution if you find you make a bit messy. I use low cut when necessary, but you can see I don't use all the time. But yeah, most of the time the EQ I will cut the low if they don't really add nothing, and I will always try to boost frequencies that kind of enhance your sound inside the mix. But other than that, now let's talk about the mastering. So this is what I would call a homemade mastering. I don't recommend to do the master yourself. I always recommend someone else first, because he's gonna have fresh ears and he's gonna hear things that you cannot, because you already hear your track too many times. Second, he's probably gonna have a better room to do that, because it's very important to have a very well treated room. Nevertheless, I like to do what I call a homemade mastering. I call it like this because it's allowing you to have a taste of what your sound will sound when it's mastered. And for example, if you want to try your track in a club or in a festival and you want your track to be a bit more powerful and to be able to compete with the rest of the track which has been mastered, it's important to know a little bit about how you can boost that. So usually my main goal will be making sure everything under 120 Hz is in mono and adding a bit of stereo as well. I will as well try to use the compressor to kind of glue everything to be a bit more compact. It's gonna add a bit of loudness, so I'm gonna use the glue compressor for that. And then I will usually use EQ to kind of rebalance slightly the mix if needed. I like to use mid-side EQ to add some stereo, and then I will just process with some saturation and limiter to add some loudness. Yeah, so we have our track like this. So like I said, utility, bass in mono with 120 Hz. So the compressor on the master, I usually EQ the input signal. So like this, it's not your kick triggering the compressor. And so like this, you got a more global compression. The setting is pretty much always the same. I use attack at 30 milliseconds. Then the release, this depends how you want your compressor to react. If you want something more pumping or not. This is really track by track. I choose which one I found the best for me. There is no really like tips I can give you. I will always leave the ratio at 4 because 10 is more like a limiter, 2 is like no enough. And then when it is like this, I will bring down the threshold. This again, it depends how much compression you want. I will usually do like a bit between 2-3 dB of reduction. I don't want something too crazy. And then I will crank up the makeup gain until almost until the maximum. So here I could have gone a little bit more, but like this was good. Then EQ to rebalance. So there is things I always do, like a low cut around 30 Hz, just to get rid of all of this unnecessary frequency. Sometimes I will cut, it depends, in between the range of 200, 400 Hz. There will usually a frequency that kind of makes things a bit messy. So I always tame it a little bit. And then usually I like to boost at either 1 kHz, 3 kHz, 5 kHz, 8 kHz. These are kind of frequency to make you sound a little bit more intelligible. So that's why I usually boost around there. And then you can use a high shelf at 3 kHz to kind of boost all of that. And then I will use a high cut at 16, 17 kHz to really this very high unnecessary frequency as well. Yeah, and then I use EQ8. So this is kind of a preset template I use often, where I will on the side remove the low because I don't need, and I will boost. You see at 3 kHz, 500, and then you can see it's kind of opposite kind of shape with the middle, where I will boost obviously where 120 Hz, and there at 1 kilo, and I will boost the high shelf as well to have the high frequency a bit more boost in the middle. This is to slightly enhance the stereo. Obviously, it depends how stereo your signal is before, because if your signal is very mono before, it's not gonna do magic. It's not gonna be able to make it way much more stereo. But if you have a bit of stereo, usually it enhances it a little bit well. And then we have our limiter. So I use color limiter. This is from the Max for Light Creative extension. What I like about this limiter is you have the saturation knob, which gonna add some nice harmonics to your sound. So you're gonna hear, obviously it's gonna add loudness. But somehow I always feel like it make the sound a bit more full, a bit more stereo somehow. So that's why I like to use it. Not especially to like kind of use as the limiter to cut the peaks, but you see it doesn't even really work on the peaks. But yeah, it's a great device I like to use a lot. And then I will use a limiter. So you can see here I haven't been too crazy on the limiter. It doesn't squash everything because this kind of track I kind of don't like when they are too squashed. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And yeah, that's pretty much it for our track today. I hope you like this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to grab the template, it's a great way to support me. The link in the description. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon, guys. Bye bye.